If you've never stood barefoot on your own patio watching a woman you barely know weld a locked iron gate across your private pool entrance while quoting non-existent HOA bylaws, then you've never met Margaret. It all happened on one of those bright Saturday mornings meant for sunbathing and family fun, not for battling suburban tyranny dressed in a wide-brimmed visor and khakis. I came outside with my coffee, blinked twice at the half-built monstrosity taking shape on my property, and asked the only question that seemed logical in that moment, "Margaret, what in the chlorinated hell are you doing?" She turned slowly as if she'd practiced the move in a mirror and replied, "I'm protecting the community. You'll thank me later." Our golden retriever, Sergeant Bubbles, who had been lazily floating on his pool raft moments earlier, jumped out of the water and barked furiously. He tried to chase off the welder, but Margaret had already installed a keypad and laminated pool access by HOA approval only signs on both sides of the gate. It was at that precise moment I realized I wasn't dealing with just a nosy neighbor. I was under siege. 2 days before, life had been normal. Our backyard pool was our little haven, something my wife and I had worked for over years of saving. It was the place where our kids splashed after school and Sergeant Bubbles enjoyed floating in his ducky vest, tail wagging like a propeller. But that peace shattered when Margaret self-appointed herself as vice president of the HOA. The previous VP had moved to Florida and Margaret swooped in like a vulture claiming the title as if it were her birthright. With her imaginary crown, she unleashed her own brand of neighborhood martial law. She began with notices about unauthorized lawn furniture, moved on to backyard light curfews, and now teased an iron gate ceiling off our private pool. She hired a contractor, presenting herself as authorized to commission work on behalf of the HOA. It wasn't a simple fence. This was a heavy-duty wrought iron barrier, keypad, motion lights, and even a speaker that beeped when someone approached. It looked more suited for a Hollywood mansion than a middle-class backyard. I stood there, dumbfounded, as Margaret rattled off some gibberish about shared property lines and community amenity protocols. I told her plainly the pool was on my land, built entirely with my funds, and had nothing to do with HOA resources. She gave me a slow, condescending nod like I was the one who didn't understand the rules. "Yes," she said, "but it visually represents a communal benefit. That's part of the bylaws now. Page 23. I can print you a copy." "Did you write page 23 yourself?" I asked. She didn't blink. "Someone had to fill the gap," she said, which sounded like the start of every dictatorship I'd ever read about. My wife called the city. An inspector arrived, looked at the gate, shook his head, and muttered, "Sir, did you know this is registered as municipal safety infrastructure?" I almost choked on my coffee. Apparently, Margaret had submitted blueprints to the city claiming our pool was a community resource requiring restricted entry. She even forged signatures from neighbors, including one who'd been vacationing in Mexico for months. I demanded she remove the gate. She refused. My lawyer advised filing formal complaints with both the HOA and the city, a process that could take weeks. Meanwhile, Margaret strutted around like she owned the place, clipboard in hand, reserving pool slots for neighbors and giving out codes like a hotel concierge. Our own kids couldn't get in unless she decided we were in compliance. My son scraped his knee trying to climb the gate. My daughter cried because her birthday pool party was ruined. Even Sergeant Bubbles looked confused, barking at the gate as if he could shake it open with enough determination. That night, after tucking the kids into bed, I sat outside, seething, flashlight and notebook in hand, plotting my next move. I glanced at Sergeant Bubbles sprawled beside his empty water bowl. Watching him, an idea clicked. Margaret wanted a gate? Fine. But I would give her a security system she'd never forget. Bubbles was about to become the first ever pool security dog, complete with training, technology, and a wardrobe worthy of a lifeguard. I ordered an orange vest with a waterproof whistle and a Bluetooth-enabled security camera. The next morning, while Margaret marched past the gate with her clipboard, I was in my garage laying out training cones, dog treats, and the newly arrived vest. "You, my friend," I told Bubbles, "are about to become her worst nightmare." Basic commands came first. Sit, stay, bark on cue. Bubbles caught on fast, especially when barking near the gate earned him treats. But I didn't stop there. I wired the sprinkler system to a smart plug, triggered by a wireless button strategically placed where Bubbles could boop it with his nose. Testing it twice, I grinned as the sprinklers sprayed the approach path perfectly. Margaret, meanwhile, was on a campaign. She emailed the neighborhood about bold leadership and even hosted a Facebook Live session titled How to Lead Without Fear. She stood in front of the gate like she was unveiling the next iPhone, unaware that her greatest obstacle was wearing an orange vest and had 4 legs. By midweek, the neighborhood was split. Some supported Margaret's safety-first vision. Others were ready to storm the HOA office with pitchforks. I stayed quiet but kept training Bubbles, who was quickly mastering his new role. On Friday, the first showdown came. Margaret arrived with a young couple in tow, inflatable flamingos and cooler in hand. She punched in the gate code with dramatic flair and waved them toward the pool. That's when Sergeant Bubbles sprang into action. He stood tall, gave 3 sharp barks, and slapped the sprinkler button with his paw. The sprinklers erupted, drenching the couple and sending the flamingo spinning into the mud. Margaret screamed, "That dog is a menace." I watched from the upstairs window, grinning. I clipped the footage from Bubbles' GoPro, added some dramatic music, and posted it to our neighborhood group with the caption, "Security upgrade complete. Unauthorized cannonballs will be met with wagging resistance." The post blew up overnight. Some called Bubbles Sergeant Splashes. One neighbor wrote, "That dog has more sense than the entire HOA." Margaret, predictably, responded under a fake account, accusing me of encouraging pet aggression. Ironically, the only aggression Bubbles had ever shown was enthusiastic face-licking. But Margaret wasn't done. She escalated, proposing a second keypad on the inside of the gate. When my wife overheard her plans, we knew this wasn't about safety, it was about control. What Margaret didn't know was that I had hired David Ricks, a former HOA investigator with a knack for exposing fraud. He began digging into her history. Turns out Margaret had pulled similar stunts in 2 other states, asserting control over private property by claiming community enhancement rights. As David gathered evidence, I kept feeding the online fire. The sprinkler video went viral. Someone even started selling Sergeant Bubbles security t-shirts. Margaret, in full meltdown mode, hosted a community safety assembly in her front yard. 6 people showed up. 4 left after realizing it was just another power grab. The real turning point came when the city inspector returned, this time with a film crew from zoning enforcement. They found the keypad wiring illegally connected to my power grid, with exposed wires and safety hazards galore. Meanwhile, David uncovered forged signatures and past HOA abuses in other neighborhoods. Armed with the evidence, I presented everything to the HOA board. To their credit, they acted quickly, suspending Margaret and nullifying all her unauthorized actions. But Margaret wasn't ready to surrender. She staged community pool day, handing out flyers promising snacks, inflatables, and family-friendly fun. But this wasn't a party. It was a desperate attempt to manufacture legitimacy. What Margaret didn't expect was that I'd already secured a temporary injunction from the city and flagged the sheriff's office with our case file. When she arrived with her wagon of pool noodles, the gate wouldn't open. I had changed the code and added a new lock. Sergeant Bubbles, wearing his vest, pressed the sprinkler button as Margaret rattled the gate. The mist sprayed her and the first row of guests, sending them scurrying. Then the loudspeaker kicked on, "Private property alert. This pool is not open to the public." Margaret began live streaming, ranting about injustice, but her stream cut short when the sheriff's cruiser rolled up. 2 deputies calmly approached and informed her she was trespassing. She tried to argue, claiming HOA authority, but the deputies had the paperwork in hand. As neighbors filmed the scene, Margaret was ordered to vacate. Her credibility evaporated before her very eyes. The next HOA meeting sealed her fate. Neighbors lined up to share stories of Margaret's harassment, each testimony stacking like bricks in a wall of accountability. The vote was unanimous. Margaret was suspended indefinitely, held financially responsible for the illegal gate, and ordered to reimburse the HOA for all legal costs. A week later, the gate came down. The contractor dismantled it piece by piece while neighbors watched, coffee cups in hand, cheering quietly. To celebrate, we hosted a pool party the following weekend. No flyers, no drama, just family, friends, burgers, and music. Sergeant Bubbles floated proudly on his raft, wearing a new vest embroidered with Defender of the Deep. The next Monday, Margaret put her house up for sale. By month's end, the moving trucks rolled away. Captain Bubbles sat by the fence, wagging as the last van disappeared. We didn't fight her with rage or revenge. We fought her with facts, community, and a golden retriever in a life vest. And as I watched my kids splash happily, my wife relaxed nearby, and Sergeant Bubbles lounged in the sun, I knew we'd won the battle the right way.